Hi everyone and welcome back in the forest and to my sustainable and eco-friendly tiny cabin, which is the one that you see right behind me. So a lot of you have asked me if I could maybe share some of the ideas that went into designing the house and maybe also the layout of the house and some drawings. So that is what I will be doing in this video. But I will divide it into 3 chapters. One about the form of the house, one about the functions of the house, and then lastly one about the materials that went into building the house. Before I do all of that, I'll just briefly talk about some of the inspirations and reasons behind why I chose to build a cabin like this, and also actually the vision that I had for the project before I even began. So I think that all good designs start with a vision that dictates the direction for the design and also in a way speaks to how this design will change something in the world. Maybe just for one person, the person using the design, or maybe in a broader context. So my initial inspiration for my tiny cabin here was not so much a physical inspiration like how it should look like. It was more like an inspiration as to how I could live a different life in this house. And much actually the same inspiration that I originally had for the first tiny house that I built, that I will move out of this property hopefully here in March and sell it off. But it was this idea of feeling more connected to nature in the way that I live in my house. So I have for many years I think now felt that like we as a society actually, and also as individuals, are very much departing from nature in many ways, because we don't ever have to feel like that we need to take care of the immediate nature around us to survive or thrive in any ways, because we have lost that connection, because all of the infrastructure that we build our welfare on is kind of like hidden for us. It's cables in the ground and pipes in the ground, and it is Wi-Fi in the air, and everything is just so accessible and also like not something that we can see in our daily lives, so we really take it for granted. If we open the tap, we will just get endless amounts of water out of the tap and we don't have to think about the scarcity issues. And the same goes with electricity. We can just use all of the electricity we want if we just pay some bills. So we don't have this sense of connection to nature, and also how nature's resources are very limited and actually very scarce, and that we are actually over consuming these resources and that it has an impact on the planet. We don't feel that in our everyday lives. So I feel that that was something that you could use as an inspiration for designing a house, even though it sounds a little bit dramatic. But like, we live in a house but on a planet. And I think those prepositions are important to have in mind, because we need to think about the consequences of our actions if we are to live more sustainably, I guess, and indeed design a more sustainable world for the future. And we cannot think our way to doing that. We also need to act, and we need to try out different solutions and see what works and what doesn't work. So that is very much the inspiration for this project. But he doesn't think much about that, I guess. But that was just my inspiration, like on a grand level. I also had some more concrete inspiration, because like I've always wanted to have this kind of like a log cabin, like the Canadian archetype of a log cabin. So, but I'm not a log cabin builder. So this is kind of like a hybrid of a more regular tiny house that you can see many places in Denmark, and then the more classical log cabin design. So I try to combine the two. So that is what I will be talking about in this video. So let's take a look at the shape of the house seen from the outside. So as you can see, it's a fairly classically shaped house, like it's square, and then there is a saddle roof. And then this is the southern and western sides of the house. So you can see right now that on the south side I have 2 windows and a terrace door, and then a skylight triple pane in the roof. And then to the west I have my soon-to-be porch. where you can also see some of the inspiration for the log cabin design with the logs that you can see here. Okay, so I just moved over to the western and the northern end of the house, so you can see it from this perspective. Here you can see the logs and also the main entrance. But on this northern end of the house, I have actually made some room for an additional building if it is necessary in the future. I don't know, but it's the window to the living room that you see on the right side, and here you could make a door into a new room if it was necessary in the future. And then there is not much interesting to say yet about the eastern side of the house. This is the window for one of the sleeping lofts, so I can get the morning sun from there. And then in the future I will build a cold room here so I can enter from the house, but right now I'm just storing like building materials and stuff that I will use on the homestead later. And obviously it's also relevant to talk about the size of the house. And a lot of people, including people on this channel, have asked me why the heck it is that I built such a small house when it is that I now built a new house. But it is because like tiny living is my thing, and I think it's totally relevant to be exploring new ways of living where we can live not only with sustainable materials and build houses out of it, but also live like sustainable lives with a smaller ecological footprint. And even though this house is bigger than my old tiny house, it is still fairly small compared to the new houses that we built here in Denmark. Like for the last, I think, 4 decades or so, Danes have built bigger and bigger houses every time they build new houses. Beach houses or summer houses, and also like regular main houses. They have all like increased in size every decade. So we are spending more and more resources to cover the same basic human needs. And obviously that is not very sustainable. So if every people in the world were to have the consumption levels of Danes, we would need like 4 planets of resources to have resources enough. And obviously that is not very sustainable, and it's not very ethical, and it is not very future-proofing to be building in that way. Even though we insulate our houses better and stuff like that, yeah, it's okay, but we still use more and more resources, and it is totally not feasible in the long run. So I still think that tiny living is super relevant to explore, but it does not have to mean that you only live on like 10 square meters. You can still live in a house that is like 30 or 50 square meters and still say that you live tiny, because compared to the standards in Denmark, that is still very, very small. So my house is, the main house is 5.2 by 6.2 meters, and then I have the porch, which is 5.2 meters times 1.5 meter. And then I'll have a few additional buildings which I will talk about in the next chapter. And now to a little talk about the functions of the house. And actually the first function I want to talk about is actually the porch, which you can see out here. Because it has like a recreational function, because you can sit and enjoy the view to the meadow. And I imagine that it's also the perfect spot for drying my laundry, because it's obviously under a roof and it's pointed towards west, where I get a lot of wind from, so it can ventilate quite a lot. And then we can go inside and see how everything looks right now. So I'm just laying the floor right now, so everything is a little bit messy. So my cabin is basically just one big room that is divided into different smaller sections. So this is the dining area, where I have a view to the kitchen garden from the one window, and then from the other window I have a view to the meadow. Over in this corner I will have my living room, so I'll have like a sofa and a small table, also view to the meadow and just to the forest out of that window. And then on this wall, I think I will have a stove here in a reasonable distance from the sofa, and then maybe a small table where I can edit some of my videos. And then in this corner, it's a bit messy right now, but it will be the bathroom under this sleeping loft. So it will have a door going out to the bathroom, where I will have a toilet and a washing machine and a hand wash and maybe a bathtub. And then in the last corner I will have my kitchen, because it overlooks also the kitchen garden to the south, and I will have 2 kitchen counters, and it will be a fairly normal kitchen. It will have like electric stove and like maybe not a dishwasher. I don't think so, because I actually like washing my dishes by hand. But actually the stove that will be here will be a kitchen stove, so it will have like a chamber, so I can make food inside of it and also cook stuff on top of it. And then over here, you can't see it now, but there will be a door out to a cold room, because it's very practical that it's just next to the kitchen. Then I can go out there and get my vegetables and pumpkins and apples and whatnot that I've harvested in the garden and put in for the winter. And it's actually very practical that the bathroom and the kitchen are close to one another, because they share some of the same pipes for water and cables for electricity. So it's just a nice tip to have them close to one another in the one end of the house. And then if we pan the camera over to this door, it will actually lead out to another additional building, which will be kind of like a small greenhouse, an extra space, but it will actually cover most of the south side of the house. But it will also have like a lot of windows and a door in it, so it will be a very light room, and you can look through the windows out into the garden. And this greenhouse is just a perfect addition to the kitchen, because it means that I can go directly from the kitchen out and get some tomatoes and cucumbers in the greenhouse. And from the greenhouse I will be able to go directly into the kitchen garden, which I have not made yet. I will start with that in March. So there is an easy access from the kitchen garden to the kitchen. And then on top of the bathroom I have my one sleeping loft, which is quite a mess right now because I have the building materials. But it will have a staircase with an angle, so I can go up and then turn 90 degrees and then go up on the sleeping loft. So I have a very secure access to the sleeping loft. And then maybe I will have some wardrobe and some storage capacity up there, but primarily a bed. And then under the staircase, I think I'll just build some space for storage and stuff like practical utilities for the house. And then of course the kitchen and the dining room are faced towards south, which is a good thing, because in wintertime I will spend a lot of time in these rooms, so I can suck up some sun energy during the day when I'm spending time in these rooms. So I guess it's not totally irrelevant how you position the functions of the house in terms of where the sun is during the day, because it affects your body in terms of energy, maybe to a greater extent than we normally think about. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, my considerations about what materials and resources to use in this eco-friendly cabin build have obviously also played a major role. And in my case, it was obviously a high priority to get very sustainable materials for the build. And I divide that into 3 categories, I think, because some are recycled, some are just very natural products that don't have any toxic chemicals in them, and some are local materials. So for instance, I have my doors and windows, which are these beautiful dark mahogany windows that I was very lucky to find, and they are recycled and they will last forever, and they are just really good quality. So you want to build something obviously that can last for a long time if you want to build sustainably, and they have like many years in them still. Then also these old beams that I use for the sleeping lofts, they are also recycled. And I will try to put as many recycled materials in the build as I can in the future, especially when I build the furniture and everything in the terrace, I think also. So that's just a high priority. And then I have a lot of materials with a very low CO2 impact in production, like the wooden fiber plates that I covered the house with. They are only made out of wooden fiber that is somehow compressed together by using some kind of water extraction technique, and they are breathable, so they can ventilate, and they are actually just a natural product. And the same goes with the insulation that you see behind me here. This insulation is really just wooden fibers that are compressed in a way so that they function as a breathable insulation. So that's also super sustainable. And again, a lot of materials for the house are actually just like very natural materials. And the floor that I'm laying in the house right now, it's also just untreated wood. And then I try to use as many local materials as I can also. Like the beams that you see on the front side of the house, they are from my neighbor, and I cut them down last March, so almost a year ago. So they have just been drying out last season. So it's nice to know that you can also just take some resources from your local neighborhood and then build something out of it. I really like that idea. And also the cladding for the house, it will just be some rough boards that I buy from the local sawmill. And he cuts down trees here on Djursland where I live. So it will also just be a very local, natural cladding for my house that I will put up in April. So, but again, I will use local materials when I build the furniture and the kitchen stuff inside of the house later on. I'll just try to use as many local materials as possible. But then I have my roof, which is made out of steel, and it is like contrary to the rest. It is something that is very unsustainable because it's the highest emitter of CO2 in production that you can get. But it was a rest party that I bought cheaply, so no one could use it anyways. Like in the long run, steel is just of a high quality, so it can just be melted and used again and again, and in that way be recycled in the future. So it's not super wasteful in that way, I guess, because this steel roof can last for many, many years because it is steel. And then when it's done, it can just be given a new life somewhere else. And another way that the question of resources is relevant for the design of this house is the way that the house will be designed to collect and harvest resources. So because back to the vision of the house, I not only wanted to have a low impact, I also want to live in a way that reflects this reality that we human beings are a part of nature and that our thriving should be like more illustrated in the way that we live and design our houses. So one way that I will try to achieve that with my design is for the house to be able to collect rainwater and sun energy. So my plan is that I will collect rainwater for my toilet and for my washing machine, because that's fairly easy and legal for me to do that. So I will have like some collection systems in the soil where I will have like a water pump that is connected to some kind of solar panel that pumps up the water and then delivers it into the toilet and to the washing machine. And then I will also have like from the roof, I will have some gutters that collect the rainwater and send it into the garden, and thereby feeding the raised beds in the garden and watering them automatically. Which is why the house is placed a little bit high on an elevated spot on the property just north of the kitchen garden, because then it's easy for the water to drain down into the beds. So that's one way to do it. But I also have like my outdoor rainwater shower on the annex, and I think I will make like a rainwater system for a small pond where I will have some ducks to eat the slugs in the garden, I think, and then the pond will get the water from the roof of the woodshed. And then also in terms of sun energy, my plan is of course to have some solar panels on the roof and also a solar heat collector that will just be up on this roof, which is why the house has a broad side that turns towards south, because then I have a lot of space on the roof to be putting up solar panels and solar heat collectors. And then I will have the greenhouse outside of the house on this side, and it will also act like a heat collector for the house. So it will take up actually the entire length of the house and thereby automatically accumulating some heat from the sun and deliver it into the house. And I have actually also chosen some materials that are able to store heat better. Like wooden fiber insulation has some amazing properties, because normally when you talk about the insulation value of any given type of insulation, you talk about the R value, which indicate the material's ability to make air molecules stand still and thereby insulate. But wooden fiber insulation, in addition to that, also is good at storing heat because it has a fairly high density. So once it's heated up, it takes a long time for it to release the heat again. So that's why it's a perfect insulation material, because it in a way insulates in two ways. And then around my fireplace, I think I'll build kind of like a wall of some big stones, because obviously they also have a high density, and once they are heated up, they will just radiate that warmth back to the house during the night. And on the long sides of the house for cladding on the inside, I will have clay. And clay is just this fantastic material that can like act as a vapor barrier. It can absorb moist slowly and release it through the structure because it is a breathable building. And then it can also collect heat and again radiate it back into the house during the night when you heat it up during the winter time. So these are different ways that I can be reminded of my connection to nature, because my house and my thriving in a way is so directly dependent on how my house works in tandem with nature. So these were my 3 approaches for designing a sustainable and eco-friendly cabin in the woods. And as you have seen in this video and can see right now, I'm not totally done with the cabin yet, but I think that I will be sometime here in the spring. But I will take a break from building here in March, because I will be focusing on designing the garden also, because I need to be ready for the spring, obviously, if I want to get any food out of my garden. But I can't wait to tell that story also, because in a way, the house and the garden, and in reality the entire homestead, are kind of like, or will be kind of like, bound together by the same permaculture gardening principles. So it's kind of like one big design, where the house is just one part of a greater story, and it will take shape over the course of the next year or so. But anyways, I hope I answered most of your questions. I know that you had a lot, and I think that I forgot a lot maybe because there were just so many things to say, but you can always just write below and then I'll try to answer it. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe found some inspiration. See you again next week.